The sky of Vel'Kor burned like iron in a forge. Ash fell like dark snow, drifting over the battlefield, a wasteland of shattered metallic structures and scorched alien architecture blown apart by kinetic bombardments. What had once been a crystalline city of the Vel'Korian Empire was now a fractured graveyard of glass shards and molten alloy. The air stank of ozone and blood, Terran blood. Corporal Mason Reed pressed his shoulder into the charred pillar of collapsed alien stonework, breath tight, pulse drumming. His visor flickered with warnings: oxygen contamination, radiation spikes, biohazard particulates, but he ignored them. A medic for 6 years, a soldier for only 2. If humanity needed him to be both, he'd be both. If they needed him to die, he'd do that too. He blinked away sweat, or was it blood? It didn't matter, pushing back the thought. Focus, Mason. One breath at a time. Behind him, Private Jonas muttered through gritted teeth, voice raw, trembling with pain. They hit my side. I can't feel my arm. Mason turned. Jonas was slumped against the rock, blood pouring through the gaps in his armor like oil through cracked plating. A stomach wound, deep, likely perforated intestines, infections waiting in minutes, a death sentence. But Jonas wasn't crying. He wasn't surrendering. With his good hand, he was still reloading his rifle. Good man, Mason thought. Mason knelt beside him, fingers fast with gauze and synth foam. Listen to me, you're going to be okay. Jonas let out an agonized laugh. You're a terrible liar, Doc. Mason smirked despite himself. Yeah, but don't die on me yet. I still haven't paid you back for beating me at hologrid chess. Jonas winced, but his eyes lit with stubborn fire. You can't kill me. My mother said God likes me. Mason tightened the bandage. Then remind him again. They laughed. It wasn't humor, it was defiance. And somewhere above them, thunder rolled, a low, alien roar. The enemy was approaching. The aliens' perspective Vel'Korian armor glinted green-blue in the crimson sunlight. Their bodies were tall, almost avian sleek and elegant, enriched with biontal exoskeletons. Their voices hissed in metallic clicks as they reached the edge of the rubble. Commander Thrask observed through multifaceted eyes. Around him, his warriors held their plasma spears at the ready. Report, he ordered. A scout knelt before him. Terran casualties, high, yet they persist in fighting. Thrask's mandibles flexed. They are soft-fleshed, weak-boned. They should be extinguished swiftly. Yes, sir, but the wounded, they continue to move, even after spinal hemorrhage, even after organ breach. Thrask paused. Impossible. Organic life ceases function upon fatal tissue failure. The scout hesitated. Sir, these do not. They moved deeper into the ruin, and there he saw them. 5 Terran soldiers, one missing a leg, one shot through the chest, one barely conscious, still firing their rifles in coordinated bursts. No trained alien warrior could continue after sustaining such injuries. Their biology was logical, efficient, predictable, but humans, Thrask realized something unsettling. Terrans fought in violation of death. Mason's inner battle, Mason's hands trembled, not from fear but exhaustion. He was running on fumes, adrenaline. Maybe something deeper, something like purpose. He peeked around the rubble wall and fired a burst. Saw a Vel'Korian go down, spear clattering. He ducked back, breath sharp. Jonas looked up at him. Any chance we get evac? None, Mason said quietly. Command thinks we're already dead. Jonas nodded as if that made sense. Fair enough. Silence. Then Jonas laughed again. Hey, Doc, what do you think they'll put on our graves? Mason shook his head. There won't be graves, just memory. Jonas blinked almost reverently. That's enough. And Mason felt something, not pride, not hope, something older, something that belonged to ancestors who hunted in the dark before fire was tamed. Humans weren't the strongest species, not the fastest, not the hardest armored, but they were the ones who refused to stay down. And sometimes Mason wondered, maybe that wasn't evolution or biology at all. Maybe that was the soul, the last push gunfire, screaming. Hiss of plasma bolts scorching stone. One by one his squad was cut down, but they didn't collapse. The man with a hole through his lung kept firing 23 seconds longer. The one missing a leg crawled forward, still moving, still aiming. Vel'Korian soldiers recoiled, literal fear in their movements. Thrask struggled to understand how these creatures sustain mortal wounds and continue combat. His attendant whispered, trembling, "Are they even? Biological?" Thrask shook his head. No. They are biological, but their cognitive response to death is flawed. He watched as a Terran soldier took a spear through the abdomen and still pulled the alien closer so he could stab him with a combat knife. They fight after dying, Thrask murmured. In that moment Mason rose, not because he was unhurt, his left side was shredded, ribs probably fractured, not because he was fearless, his heart hammered with primal terror, but because his squad was still fighting. His brothers were still breathing, even if only to draw one final breath before death. Mason shouted deep, hoarse, furious, "For Terra!" and 5 dying men roared it back. For Terra, the divine moment something shifted. Mason didn't look upward, didn't pray, not consciously. But in the chaos, amid all the death, a calmness settled on him, the feeling that what they did here mattered, not to history books, not to commanders, but to the quiet ledger of the universe. Jonah's breathed sharply, barely alive. "Doc, I'm not scared anymore. Someone here with us." Mason didn't answer, but he felt it too, a presence like a still wind, an unseen witness. Maybe God didn't save lives. Maybe he honored how they were spent. Mason's choice, he could fall back behind cover and maybe survive a minute longer. Instead, Mason stepped out, fully visible, armor cracked, blood leaking down his side. Once a medic, now a soldier. He fired until his rifle overheated. Then he threw it aside and took Jonas's weapon. Thrask stared at him, a soft-skinned mammal defying reality. "Why don't you die?" Thrask shouted in disbelief. Mason stumbled forward, coughing blood, but his eyes burned with life. "Because we haven't finished." He kept shooting and shooting, until at last only 3 Vel'Korians remained standing. Mason collapsed to his knees, bleeding out fast. But even as consciousness faded, he saw Thrask stepping back, not in victory, but in fear. The alien commander whispered, "These humans fight beyond death," and someone somewhere in the ruins whispered a prayer into the smoking wind. Mason drifted in and out of awareness, the world flickering like a failing hollow projector. Sound became muffled, distant, then painfully sharp. His heartbeat thundered in his ears, then faded, then returned. He was lying on the broken ground of Vel'Kor, staring up at the sickly yellow-gray sky. The taste of copper filled his mouth. His vision doubled, blurred, then cleared. Pain anchored him to existence. And somewhere beyond it, the faintest voice whispered, not audible, but felt, "Not yet." Mason didn't know if the voice came from heaven or brain misfire or something deeper, but he obeyed it. He pulled one arm beneath him and forced himself onto his side. It was only then he realized Jonas was still breathing beside him. Barely, but breathing. The alien examination 20 meters away, Commander Thrask paced among the bodies of the fallen Terrans. He knelt by one corpse, Private Klein. The man had taken a plasma strike directly through the heart. Thrask tapped his sensor device against the wound. His circulatory organ was fully obliterated, Thrask hissed. Another alien warrior responded, "Yes, Commander." Yet he fired 19 additional shots after cardiac death. The alien hesitated. "It defies natural function." Thrask straightened, mandibles clenching. Terrans are illogical organisms. A third alien knelt beside a dead human and cautiously poked the unmoving hand with the tip of a spear. Suddenly, the corpse jerked. A reflex, a final electrical impulse firing through dead nerves. The alien recoiled in terror. "Sir, they move even after. They are twitching," Thrask snapped. "Not alive." But even he sounded unsure. He turned toward another human, a man with a fully severed femoral artery, who had still dragged himself several meters after the fatal injury, creating a long trail of smeared blood. "Look at this," Thrask said softly. "They continue locomotion without viable survivability." A silence passed among the alien troops. Then one asked the question others were afraid to. Do they know when they've died?" Thrask stared at the remains of Mason's squad. "I am no longer certain." Mason's will to move back by the debris wall, Mason pushed himself up onto his knees, gasping. His body screamed, but his mind, his will, roared louder. He was alive. Barely. The torn side of his torso leaked blood through armor fractures, soaking into the alien dust beneath him. His oxygen levels were dropping. His internal bleeding severe, but he had one mission left, Jonas. Mason crawled over to him. Jonas's eyes were half open, unfocused. His breaths were shallow, irregular. Death had one hand on his shoulder. Hey, Mason whispered. Jonas blinked slowly. Doc, that you? Yeah, you don't look good, Jonas murmured. Mason chuckled weakly. Neither do you. Jonas smiled faintly. Then his eyes shifted not upward, not into hallucination, but toward Mason's face with clarity. Did we make a difference? Mason looked at him. There were no speeches, no lies. Yes, he said simply. Jonas exhaled. Maybe a laugh, maybe a sigh. But the breath left him and did not return. Mason's head bowed. He placed one blood-smeared hand on Jonas's chest where the man's heart had stopped. And for a moment Mason felt something stir in the quiet, the presence again, the gentle affirmation of something unseen. He mattered. Thrask approaches. Mason heard the sound of alien footsteps. He slowly lifted his gaze. Commander Thrask stood before him, no weapon drawn, just curiosity. You should be dead, Thrask said bluntly. Mason coughed. I'm working on it, Thrask tilted his head. Your multiple organ systems have failed. Your internal bleeding is catastrophic, and yet you maintain mobility and cognitive coherence. Mason shrugged. Human biology. No, Thrask said. Human defiance. They stared at each other, man and alien, soft and armored, frail and towering. Mason spoke first. We don't fight because we can. We fight because we must. Thrask studied him. Why? What purpose does continued suffering serve? Mason wiped blood from his mouth. Purpose isn't always logical. Thrask narrowed his electric blue eyes. Perhaps God guides you. Mason froze, the word coming from him. Thrask continued, voice softer. I have observed your people. Some pray before battle. Some murmur appeals to unseen entities. I thought it primitive superstition. Mason leaned back against the rubble. Maybe it is. Yet, Thrask pressed, many of your warriors survive against survival odds. Many persist despite fatal harm. As if assisted, he took a step closer. Is God real, Terran? Mason exhaled slowly. His vision flickered. His body was almost gone. He didn't answer with philosophy or scripture, just truth. I don't know, Thrask blinked. Mason continued, but when we stand together, when we refuse to fall, when we keep going even when every law of biology says stop, it feels like someone else with us. Thrask stared, not mocking, not doubtful, but unsettled, perhaps enlightened. Mason's last strength, Mason's balance wavered. He steadied himself, then fell forward onto one palm. Thrask reacted instantly, catching him with an armored arm. Slowly, Thrask lowered Mason into a seated position. You cannot live long, the alien commander observed. I know, Mason whispered. Is there anything you desire in your final minutes? Mason looked toward the shattered skyline, the broken towers of the alien city, the drifting embers, the corpses of his squad, the fading light. Then he said, record what you saw here. Tell your people, humans fight until the very end. Thrask nodded solemnly. Then Mason added, and one more thing. Thrask leaned in. Mason whispered, we didn't fight because we thought we'd survive. He looked Thrask directly in the eye. We fought because someone had to. A quiet passing, Mason's breath grew weaker. His heartbeat slowed, pain dimmed, then a final pulse, a final exhale, a stillness. Thrask stared at him. This time Mason did not move. Death had spoken and Mason obeyed at last. And yet Thrask felt something inexplicable, not relief, not triumph, something more like reverence. The alien commander bowed his head in respect, an ancient Vel'Korian gesture reserved for honored foes, and the wind passed across the battlefield, gentle, almost compassionate. Some would call it coincidence. Others might call it God. The alien doctrine hours later, Thrask addressed his command staff inside a shattered crystalline structure. Alien officers stood in a semicircle, awaiting his report. Thrask projected holographic recordings of the Terran soldiers in their final moments. They continue combat despite heart destruction, he announced. A scientist officer hissed. Impossible. No blood, no motor coordination, no survival. And yet, Thrask replied, they persist. They are broken and soft, another officer remarked. Thrask turned sharply. They are unyielding. Silence. Thrask continued, Terrans do not cease at biological failure. Their cells give up, their organs surrender, but the Terran does not. One scientist, elderly, wise, spoke thoughtfully. Then perhaps they possess two lives, one biological, one willed into being. Thrask nodded. And when the first fails, the second drives them onward. The room stirred uneasily. Commander, an aide asked, what shall we call this phenomenon? Thrask looked toward the night sky of Vel'Kor. Softly he said, the after-death interval. But elsewhere in the ruins, beneath shattered stone and scorched debris, a faint heartbeat still echoed. One human wasn't dead yet, not quite, not fully, and the war for Vel'Kor wasn't finished. Silence had settled over the ruins, not peace, only the temporary hush between storms. Above the broken battlefield, the ash began to fall again, thin, pale, drifting like the slow settling of ancient dust on forgotten history. The wind shifted, scraping its voice across the ravaged terrain of Vel'Kor and carrying with it the faint smell of ionized plasma and human blood. And under a collapsed slab of alien alloy, buried beneath shadow and debris, something stirred. Not much, just a twitch of fingers, a pulse, a breath. Private Alden Cole was a quiet man, even among soldiers, a former mechanic from New Boston Arcology, drafted into the Terran Defense Corps when the Vel'Korian invasion threatened the colonies. He wasn't the strongest, not the fastest, not the bravest, but he had one advantage: he didn't know how to quit. Even before the war, his coworkers used to joke, "Cole doesn't stop until the engine runs, the lights work, and the damn world listens." Under the rubble, semi-conscious, organs battered, internal bleeding severe, Alden took one ragged breath. It hurt like hell. It meant life. He took another. And another. Awakening, his vision was a haze of muffled gray. His ears heard only muted tones, vibrations more than sound. Then, gradually, clarity returned. He saw darkness above him, inches from his face, a rock, a slab, debris pinning him down. His left arm was trapped. His ribs felt cracked. Every lungful of air was a bloody gurgle, but he was breathing. He didn't know how long he'd been unconscious. Minutes, hours, then he remembered Mason Reed, and Jonas, and all the others, dead. He knew it, but maybe not all. He shifted his fingers. Pain exploded, raw and violent, but pain meant nerves firing. Pain meant body still receiving orders. Pain meant alive. Cole spat blood and whispered, for no one to hear, "Not done yet." The alien post-mortem lab several kilometers away, inside a fractured Vel'Korian fortress converted into a field research lab, Thrask and his scientists continued their autopsies. Human corpses lay on bio-tables, respectfully straightened, eyes closed. Even in death, Thrask insisted they be treated with honor. Holographic tendrils scanned tissues. Monitors translated heartbeat patterns. Alien medical instruments probed muscle fiber elasticity and nerve conductivity. One scientist, scholar diagnosed Vrel, spoke in a clicking monotone. Even after death, Terran neural pathways retain residual activity. Their bodies resist cessation. Thrask watched in silence. Vrel continued, and this one, he gestured to a corpse, shows evidence of movement several minutes after fatal spinal disruption. Another scientist added, "It is almost as though their bodies refuse to acknowledge death until something completes internally." Thrask asked, "What something?" No one answered, because no one knew. The rumbling under stone back at the battlefield, Alden Cole began trying to move. He tested his limbs, right arm functional, left arm crushed, possibly shattered. Right leg bruised, scraped. Left leg maybe fractured, maybe not. His ribs, oh, those were screaming, but screaming was good. Pain was good. Pain meant life. He shifted his body weight and managed to move a boulder by a centimeter, then another. Every motion cost him blood pressure and breath, but movement happened. When the stone shifted just enough, light seeped through, pale and dusty. Alden blinked against it. Then he heard voices, Vel'Korian voices. Close, very close. He froze. He wasn't in the clear, not even close. Alien scavengers, 3 Vel'Korian foot soldiers, were sweeping the ruins, searching for salvage and gathering human weapons for study. Their speech was a series of sharp, melodic clicks. "Commander Thrask is obsessed with these Terrans," one complained. "He says they have impossible endurance," another replied. "They are primitives. Their persistence is brute stubbornness, not biological marvel." A third leaned against the rubble, directly on the stone that pinned Cole. "Regardless, I dislike examining corpses," he said. "They twitch." The others laughed uneasily. Cole listened. Through the cracking of stone and dust, he heard every word. His heart pounded not from fear but adrenaline. He had two choices: wait for them to move on or reveal himself. If he waited, he might suffocate. If he revealed himself, he might die. Then he remembered Mason. We didn't fight because we thought we'd survive. We fought because someone had to. Cole clenched his jaw and pushed. The rock shifted, dust poured downward. The Vel'Korian leaning on the slab felt the weight shift beneath him. He turned, just in time to see a blood-soaked human arm break through the stone beneath and grab him by the throat. The impossible resurrection, the alien shrieked in shock. From beneath the rubble, Alden Cole erupted upward, covered in dust, eyes blazing, one arm limp and useless, the other fueled by pure survival instinct. He roared not words, not language, just a primal sound of life refusing to end. The Vel'Korian collapsed backward. His comrades stumbled away in pure terror. One of them wailed, "It lives, it lives." Cole staggered to his feet, barely. He looked like a corpse walking, blood pouring, skin ashen, eyes sunken, breathing ragged. He should not be standing. He should not be conscious. He should be dead, but he was none of those. He was human. Fight on empty, a Vel'Korian raised a plasma pistol. Cole didn't wait. He grabbed the dropped plasma spear from the ground and hurled it, one-armed, with desperate force. The spear impaled the alien clean through. Cole's vision blurred. His legs buckled. He fell to one knee, but he still wasn't done. Another alien fired. The plasma bolt scorched Cole's side, burning flesh. He barely felt it. Pain was drowning under will. Cole snatched a Terran rifle from the ground, still loaded, and fired 3 precise shots. The alien collapsed. The last one dropped his weapon and fled, ran, escaped, as if death itself was chasing him. But he wasn't running from death. He was running from a dead man who refused to stop. Thrask confronts the miracle minutes later. Alarms blared through the Vel'Korian network. Urgent. Human survivor LOCATD. Hostile. Cannot be killed. Thrask arrived at the site soon after, warriors surrounding him. Alden Cole lay on the ground again, breathing shallow, nearly gone. Thrask approached slowly. Cole's eyes flickered open. The alien commander crouched beside him. "You should not be alive," Thrask said softly. Cole gave a weak, broken grin. "Story of humanity." Thrask asked, "How are you still functioning?" Cole's voice rasped like sand on metal. "Don't need body to finish mission." Thrask stared. "What does that mean?" Cole inhaled a final breath. "Humans don't run on biology alone." His eyes closed, and this time they did not open. The divine echo. Thrask felt it again, the quiet presence he'd sensed around Mason. The air seemed to hum. The dust fell slower, as if time itself softened. And somewhere deeper than science, deeper than logic, Thrask felt as though humanity's endurance was not merely physiology, but a spark of something beyond material existence. Something meant, something willed, perhaps something guided. He whispered to himself or to the quiet cosmos above, "What are you?" Back in the alien lab, Vrel scanned their monitors and saw something terrifying. 2 more human corpses showed gradual increases in neural activity. They were waking up, again, and the Vel'Korians finally understood. Death was not the end of a human fighter. It was just another threshold to cross. Inside the Vel'Korian research nexus, crystal walls flickered with holographic data. Alien biomonitors scanned the 2 dead Terrans laid onto examination platforms. Corpses. In every medical and empirical definition, they were corpses. Heartbeat, absent. Lung activity, none. Cerebral metabolism, 0. And yet a neural blip appeared, then another. A slow, rhythmic, stubborn pulse across a region of the brain the Vel'Korians could not categorize. The aliens watched the data spike upward. Commander Thrask leaned forward. "Explain this," he demanded. Scholar diagnost Vrel ran his hands along the crystal console, mandibles tightening. "They are brain dead," Vrel stated. "Yet something drives impulses across inactive regions, something non-biological." Thrask's voice lowered. "Are they conscious?" "No," Vrel said, then hesitated. "But they may be returning." Inside a human body, inside Sergeant Oren Hale, one of the dead Terrans, something stirred. If Hale had a childhood memory or a final vision, it did not play before him. Instead, there was darkness, and far beneath it, a pulse of stubborn essence. A lifetime of instincts compressed into something older than thought. "Get up." That primitive, biological, spiritual command surged through Hale's wrecked tissues. not as a plea, but as an order. His fingers twitched, his spine arched, his chest jerked once, then he inhaled, no breath, no lungs, just a reflex. But to the Vel'Korians witnessing it, it was a resurrection. Alien fear, one attendant shrieked, stumbling back from the table. It rises, it rises. Hale's eyes did not open. He made no conscious movement, but the body's systems were rebooting. A Vel'Korian scientist scrambled to Thrask's side. This shouldn't be possible. Their internal systems are shutting down, the structure breaking, and still they seek movement, Thrask spoke slowly. Humans seem unwilling to leave existence. Another scientist whispered, "They are not like us." "No," Thrask said, "they are not like anything." The internal struggle, Hale's mind deep inside Hale's fading awareness. He floated between two worlds, one of silence, one of echo. His mind was shutting down, but another force fought inside him, wordless and ancient. He remembered his father's voice when he was a boy. "If a job needs doing, son, you get up and do it." He remembered Mason's defiant final stand. He remembered Jonas's fading smile. He remembered Earth. He remembered Terra's storms over the Atlantic arcs. He remembered the taste of cold air. He remembered being human, and humanity had work left undone. Hale's heart, once stopped, twitched, a pulse. Then another, weak, tiny, but real, impossible revival. Vrel reevaluated Hale's vitals. "He has a heartbeat," Vrel stammered. "No," another corrected. "He makes a heartbeat." Hale's lungs began to draw in air, stuttering, violent, but functioning. His eyes opened, glazed, unfocused, but alive. Thrask stepped closer. He whispered in awe, "You returned." Oren Hale looked up at him. He said nothing, but his eyes recognized Thrask and recognized the situation. Then, with a trembling, battered fist, Hale reached up and grabbed Thrask's armor, not as an attack, but as a declaration, a plea of spirit, a challenge, a message. He whispered, voice shredded yet firm, "We're not done," then fell back, breathing alive. The halo of survival. Thrask stood there frozen, quite certain this was not simply adrenaline. Not physiology, not flesh. It was will, something intangible, something Vel'Korian biology could not model, something that Thrask realized might not even originate within the body. He said softly, "There is another force inside them." Vrel clicked nervously. "Commander, you propose metaphysics." Thrask turned toward the glowing crystalline wall. He spoke the word with difficulty. "Perhaps soul." Flashpoint. Returning to war. Hale wasn't the only one. Another soldier, Private Beck, lay motionless 3 tables down. His chest was torn open, too much blood lost, no hope. The scanner showed no vital signals, yet his fingers flexed, his head jerked sideways, his broken vocal cords groaned a single syllable. "Gun," even dying, even barely conscious, his thought was not of escape, but of battle. Alien attendants recoiled in terror. Thrask did not. He approached, eyes locked on Beck's face. "You are beyond death." Beck gave a ghastly grin, a ghost of human humor in the face of the impossible. "Not yet." Humanity's secret. Thrask turned to his officers. "Terrans do not fear death," he said. "That is not their weakness. They transcend fear." "No," Thrask replied. "They simply ignore it." Vrel's eyes widened. "So death is not a barrier." "No," Thrask said, voice solemn. "It is merely a timing issue." Faith in the shadows. Later, when the examination chamber quieted, Thrask remained alone with Hale. The human was unconscious again, breathing shallowly, but alive. Thrask gazed at the battered soldier. Tentatively, the alien reached out and gently placed one clawed hand onto Hale's chest. He felt the heartbeat, fragile but present, and Thrask said quietly, "Something wants you to live." He didn't know if he spoke to Hale or the unseen force guiding him. Unknown to Thrask, far beyond the lab, in the rubble of the battlefield, beneath the fractured pillars of black stone, a faint blinking light on Mason Reed's wrist comm activated. It detected human vitals, multiple, weak but present. The system transmitted one final message, one that command back on Vel'Kor's orbiting Terran carrier would receive in time. A message that contained only 4 words, still breathing, still fighting. And somewhere in the deep night sky of Vel'Kor, a new Terran strike force was inbound, drawn by a signal sent not by the living, but by those who refused to die. The return from the raid on the Hydra Mulchers had left a peculiar residue on Mason's mind, not guilt, not shock, something stranger. A duality. The sensation of being observed, evaluated, weighed. It wasn't merely that Commander Razek Shun was studying him. It was that Mason now found himself studying Razek Shun, and the alien noticed. Corporal Mason Reed followed Razek Shun through the crystalline corridor, where every footstep echoed with tonal reverberations like chimes underwater. Ribbons of glowing script moved across the ceiling, unreadable, alien, sinuous. The ship didn't display information. It whispered it. Mason kept glancing at Razek Shun's shoulders, broad, armored by living polymer plates that expanded and contracted with breath. The alien's spine bore branching ridges that pulsed periodically with faint light. Mason had seen hundreds of alien soldiers now, but Razek Shun was different, more aware. The commander finally spoke, the translator smoothing his throat vibrations into English. "You looked at my back 7 times during the walk." Mason froze mid-step. "What? I know I didn't." "You did," Razek Shun said calmly. "You counted the number of breathing plates and wondered if they are vestigial, functional, or decorative." Mason's mouth partially opened. "Were you reading my thoughts or just my eyes?" "Your temptation is readable," Razek Shun replied. "Not your mind." Mason exhaled slow. "I wasn't trying to analyze you." The commander's head dipped in an alien imitation of a nod. "But you cannot help it now. You probe, you categorize. This is good." They reached a circular chamber, a tactical council room. But the table wasn't a table. It was a hovering field of hard light geometry forming a 3-dimensional battle map. Mason recognized Kosh, Larish, and 2 new aliens taller, plated with iridescent armor. Razek Shun gestured. "Sit." Mason hesitated. There was no chair. A moment later, a living seat literally grew up from the floor beneath him, warm, flexible, and strangely comforting. He sat, and instantly the lights dimmed. Razek Shun moved to the center of the holographic display. A series of images materialized Earth with pulsing red markers on continents, 1 over Russia, 1 over Japan, 3 across North America, 1 on the Arabian Peninsula, 1 in Central Africa. Mason stiffened. "Those are major cities," he muttered. "Why are they marked red?" Razek Shun replied. "Because your planet has begun forming knots." Mason blinked. "Knots," the alien nodded. "In your schools you are taught time is linear. In our mind architecture, time is a rope. When entities exert probability stress on reality, the rope tangles, forming knots. At every knot, something improbable is attempting to become real." Mason felt a chill. "And those red spots," Razek Shun projected the image closer. "Those locations are generating anomalous probability pressure. Something is trying to cross into your reality." Mason frowned sharply. "Are we talking about portals, wormholes, alien gateways?" Razek Shun paused, as if translating an idea too strange for English. "We are talking," he said slowly, "about an invasion that does not move through space, but through likelihood." Mason leaned forward. "But how does my planet cause that? Humanity doesn't even know how to manipulate probability." Razek Shun extended a hand, a black-clawed gesture. "You do, subconsciously. Your species is highly active in probability shaping." Mason squinted. "Meaning," the commander spoke with deliberate weight. "Meaning your species' imagination is powerful enough to tear seams in the structure of the real. When many minds expect something, or fear something, or believe something," he tapped the glowing red point over North America, "it becomes probabilistically substantial." Mason stared. "You're telling me humans think things into existence?" Razek Shun responded. "Yes, but without mastery, without direction, without discipline. You generate anomalous futures the way a child generates sparks in a powder room, accidentally." The map zoomed into northeastern Canada. Mason recognized the location, the same area from the Hydra Mulcher raid. "This zone in your country," Razek Shun continued, "was influenced by the collective fear of geological collapse exacerbated by climate rhetoric. Enough of your species imagined the Earth swallowing itself, that it actually did," Mason finished. Razek Shun nodded with calm satisfaction. "Precisely," a beat. Mason felt something unpleasant spool through him. "So all the disasters, the sinkholes, the anomalous terrain, the sky shimmers," Razek Shun completed the thought, "are the result of your species' ungoverned probability emissions." Mason swallowed. That means we're accidentally attacking ourselves. No, Razak-shun said. Worse, you are creating enemies for yourselves. Enemies that did not exist until you imagined them by fearing them. Mason's voice came out tight. So the mulchers, did we create them too? Razak-shun lifted his head slowly. We detected that species existing in potential form, yes, but they crystallized into your realm only once enough humans feared underground infestation. Mason exhaled in disbelief. So our nightmares become real. Yes, Razak-shun said softly. Your nightmares become flesh. Your catastrophes become weather. Your paranoia becomes landscape. Mason spoke almost involuntarily. And your people, the Brexari, what do you do with probability? Razak-shun straightened. We sculpt it. The room hummed. Mason stared at him. You mean you control reality? We influence its branching, Razak-shun corrected. Nudge events, guide trajectories, encourage stable chains, prevent anomalies. Yes, prevent wars, sometimes. Cause wars, also sometimes. The alien was terrifyingly honest. Mason asked quietly, so why are you here? Why interfere with Earth? Razak-shun responded, because your species reached a density of imagination pressure that crossed the galactic stability threshold. Mason whispered, we're a threat. Razak-shun looked at him not with anger, but something close to respect. You are untamed, and therefore unpredictable. One of the taller aliens, a strategist by posture, spoke in untranslated tones of grinding resonance. Razak-shun translated, he says your species is like a knotted rope. Your potential futures are tangled, your histories overlap chaotically, and at every knot is the possibility of disaster. Mason frowned. What do you want from me? Razak-shun stepped closer, towering solemn. You are different. You are the first human in our observation whose probability signature does not tangle. You do not knot. You stabilize futures rather than fracture them. Mason stared blankly. What does that even mean? I'm just a soldier, Razak-shun answered. Your actions decrease entropy. Your choices reduce chaos. Your thoughts exert reducing pressure on unstable timelines. Mason shook his head. No, I'm not special. I've made mistakes. People died because of me back home in the field. Razak-shun interrupted him gently. You misunderstand. It is not perfection that matters. It is coherence. You think forward, not sideways. You sustain direction. You compress possibility into clarity. This is rare. Mason felt something unfamiliar rise in him. Part pride, part fear. So what, you want to use me? Razak-shun's voice softened. No, we want to learn from you, to observe how you hold probability threads straight, how you prevent tangling. Mason clenched his jaw. And if I refuse, Razak-shun answered without threat, then you will be returned safely to your world. But if you return, your people may unravel themselves before you reach old age. The words hit Mason like ice. Razak-shun's eyes, dark and reflective, watched him. You saw the mulchers and felt no existential fracture, no contradictory future spirals. You simply understood the threat and acted. You did not splinter probability with panic. You harmonized it with purpose. Mason finally exhaled shakily. So I'm a stabilizer. Yes, Razak-shun said. You're telling me I can stop probability disasters. Yes, you think I can help untie the knots. Razak-shun bowed his head. Yes. Silence, a deep one. Finally Mason spoke. What's the next knot? Razak-shun gestured, and the hologram expanded again. 3 knots glowed hottest, pulsing with threat. Tokyo, Riyadh, Los Angeles. Razak-shun pointed to the one over Los Angeles. This knot is growing fastest. Within 3 weeks it will become an opening. Mason asked, opening to what? For the first time, Razak-shun looked unsettled. We do not know. The futures around it are so tangled that no branch is readable. It is impossible, a pure paradox cluster. Mason stared. And you want me there? Razak-shun nodded. You will not fight the distortion. You will focus the probability. You will make the future choose its path instead of branching into horrors. Mason stood slowly, the living chair dissolving beneath him. He turned to Razak-shun. One condition. Razak-shun straightened. Name it. Mason met his eyes. You stop treating humanity like a problem to be engineered. You treat us like partners. Razak-shun's throat lights dimmed, then warmed. That condition is accepted. Mason nodded. Then, what do I need to do? Razak-shun stepped forward and extended a hand, palm outward. Join me at the Lowe's Angel's Knot. We will face the uncertain together. Mason lifted his hand, touched the alien palm, and in that moment, something passed between them, something not psychic, not verbal, but real, a sense of alignment, a joining of futures. When Mason finally spoke, his voice had changed. Tell me everything about the Lowe's Angel's Knot, every reading, every anomaly, every prediction, every impossibility. Razak-Shun replied, I will, but first, his breathing plates fluttered. You must understand the one thing that no human has ever realized. Mason tensed. And what's that? Razak-Shun leaned close. Your species is not the soft species or the violent species. You are the knotted species, and the key to saving yourselves, his voice lowered, is learning how to untie your own minds. Lowe's angels looked normal from orbit. That was the first lie. The second was that things on Earth were still operating by familiar rules of time, space, and sanity. Mason Reed stood at a transparent viewing shield as Razak-Shun's vessel descended through cloud strata. The city stretched below, neon arteries, glass towers, gridded light, but something was wrong. Mason felt it before he saw it. Shadows moved opposite their sources. Reflections lagged behind real motion. Traffic patterns formed fractal loops. Mason frowned. You're seeing the first symptoms, Razak-Shun murmured beside him. It looks normal enough. Razak-Shun shook his head. No, it looks probable, not real. Mason didn't understand, not yet, but he felt the meaning. The ship phased invisibly through the atmosphere and settled on a cliffside above the Pacific. The hatch opened. Mason stepped outside, Earth air rushed in, and he felt like he'd been deprived of it for years. He inhaled, salt ocean, exhaust fumes, sagebrush, heat. He was home, and yet he walked forward and nearly lost balance, because the horizon was breathing, just slightly like the line where sky met, sea flexed in and out. Mason blinked, then blinked again. You're seeing it, Razak-Shun said. Reality tension. When probability strain hits critical levels, geometry itself becomes uncertain. Mason whispered, reality has anxiety. They traveled by ground in a Brexari hover transport masked in invisibility. Mason sat on the forward bench, watching the city streets through a refractive distortion. Cars moved through each other like glitching holograms, except neither driver reacted. Mason stared. They don't see any of this. No, Razak-Shun answered. Human perception filters too aggressively. Your minds choose saner interpretations. Mason pointed. That truck just phased through that blue car. Razak-Shun nodded, and in their minds it simply passed beside it. They do not perceive the collision because their consciousness rejects impossibility. Mason's voice hardened. So humanity is hallucinating normality. Razak-Shun responded carefully. You are hallucinating coherence, a survival instinct. Mason looked down at his hands. And I'm different. I see the instability. Yes, your perception accepts uncertainty. That is why you do not knot. As they entered downtown, the distortions intensified. Shadows extended upward rather than sideways. Pedestrians walked in synchronized patterns like mirrored puppets. Buildings leaned slightly toward each other as if conspiring. And the sky had seams, thin lines of silvery fissure like cracks in the dome of heaven. Mason whispered, "Oh God." Razak-Shun placed a steadying hand on Mason's shoulder. This is the edge of the knot field. They parked invisibly outside a skyscraper, a mirrored tower in LA's business district. Or what should have been a tower. Up close, Mason realized the building had no fixed height. It stretched upward and downward like a rubber band. Its windows rearranged themselves in recursive patterns. Doors migrated along its base. Mason pressed a hand to his forehead. My brain is struggling. Razak-Shun spoke calmly. Then do what you did in the raid. Do what comes naturally. Focus. Stabilize. Mason clenched his fists. He looked directly at the building and simply decided in the quiet core of his mind that it was 63 stories tall, not infinite, not undulating, 63. And just like that, the tower snapped into fixed shape, rigid, real, understandable. Razak-Shun stepped back in visible astonishment. You did it. A passing human pedestrian paused, looked at the building with confused relief, like waking from a strange dream. It's just a building, they muttered, continuing on. Mason exhaled hard. I didn't do anything. Yes, Razak Shun said with reverence. You did. You forced probability collapse. Your mind selected a reality path and suppressed the others. Mason shook his head. This is insane. I'm just one guy. You are an anchor, Razak Shun corrected. They entered. Inside the lobby, reflections moved before the actual people creating them. Mason stared as his mirror self turned his head before he did. Razak Shun explained, this building is a micro-epicenter, a probability vortex. Don't chase the reflected paths. Mason forced himself to ignore the mirror unrealities. He focused only on the floor beneath him. One step, next step. When the elevator chimed, Razak Shun guided him inside. Inside the lift, the panel didn't list floors. Instead, options read, maybe, perhaps, possible, uncertain, divergent. Mason blinked. How do we select a floor? You don't, Razak Shun said. You impose one. Mason took a breath. We're going to the top floor. And suddenly the display lit with 63. The doors closed. The elevator rose, except it didn't rise vertically. Mason felt directionless movement, sideways, diagonal, spiraling. Gravity rotated. He gripped the handrail. He whispered, 63. Again, 63. He held the number in his mind like a metal rod, and slowly the drifting motion corrected. When the doors opened, they stood on the 63rd floor. Offices and glass walls stretched out, frozen in eerie silence. But at the far end, Mason saw it. The knot, not a physical object, but a distortion. Reality bent inward like a whirlpool. Light curved around a central vortex. Air folded like origami. Mason felt pressure behind his eyeballs. Razak Shun spoke quietly. Here it is, the Lowe's Angel's knot. Mason took a slow step forward. What's inside that distortion? Razak Shun looked at him. We cannot tell. It is like trying to read a sentence that keeps rearranging itself. Mason stared into the swirling anomaly. He felt possibilities, thousands, millions, more. Some futures where LA didn't exist and a crater replaced it. Some where something monstrous emerged. Some where time fractured into repeating loops. Some where nothing happened and life continued. Too many futures. The knot was overloaded. It needed someone to choose. Razak Shun's voice came urgently. Mason, listen. Do not think in fear. Do not imagine catastrophe. Mason's heart raced. What do I do? Razak Shun placed both hands on Mason's shoulders, grounding him. You do what your species forgot how to do. You hope. You imagine the good outcome, not out of fantasy, but out of selection. Mason stared at the vortex. Images rushed through him, countless branching outcomes, but he held one. A future where the knot dissolved quietly. Where LA citizens felt only a strange moment of calm. Where no one died. Where probability healed instead of ruptured. He imagined stability. He imagined clarity. He imagined normal. And then he didn't force it, he accepted it. And the vortex responded. The swirling distortion slowed. The bending light straightened. The folded air uncreased. Reality exhaled. The knot eased. Not vanished, not yet, but loosening. Mason collapsed to one knee. Razak Shun caught him. You're doing it. Mason panted hard. This is exhausting. It will pass, Razak Shun assured. You have already quieted 1,000 chaotic outcomes. Mason struggled to his feet. Then from behind a voice spoke. Not human, not Brexari, something else. You do not belong here. Mason spun. A figure stood at the far corner, flickering, glitching, as if rendered in broken animation frames. Its shape resembled a humanoid rumor, a blurry suggestion, a possibility that hadn't fully committed to reality. Razak Shun hissed, a knot born. Mason felt cold through his bones. The flickering entity spoke again. This city will be ours. Razak Shun whispered. Mason, don't perceive him as real. If you do, he will stabilize. Mason stared at the knotborn. He consciously thought, you are nothing. You are unreal. You are not required by any viable future. The creature distorted violently, stretched, screamed without sound, and fragmented into vapor. Gone, just like that. Mason exhaled. That was terrifying. Razak Shun nodded. You defeated him by refusing to believe him. That is the human gift when properly used. The knot continued unraveling, slower now, gentler. Mason focused steadily, selecting reality with calm precision. As the last threads unwound, Razak Shun spoke. Mason, I must tell you something now, something crucial. Mason didn't look away from the fading distortion. What? Razak Shun's voice carried weight. This was not the first knot on your world. And it will not be the last. Mason steadied his breath. I figured as much. Razak Shun continued. But there is one more, one far greater, not in a city, but in a person. Mason finally turned. In who? Razak Shun met his eyes. In you. Mason froze. Razak Shun continued softly. You are not merely a stabilizer. You are the origin point of an unresolved possibility, a knot intertwined with your own past, something you have not faced. Mason felt a chill. What are you saying? Razak Shun spoke with finality. Mason Reed, the greatest knot on earth is the one tied inside your memories, and to untangle the world, he paused. You must first untangle yourself. Night draped over Lo's angels like cooling ashes. The knot had loosened, reality no longer buckling, but Mason himself felt unstable. Skin clammy, pulse uneven, thoughts fraying. They were back on the cliff, overlooking the Pacific. The waves hit rock in rhythmic detonations, and Mason felt each impact like a drumbeat in his skull. Razak Shun sat beside him, silent for once. Mason finally spoke. There's something wrong with me. Razak Shun didn't deny it. There is something unfinished inside you, something unresolved. Mason swallowed. I don't know what it is. Yes, Razak Shun said softly. You do. Memory reopens. Mason shut his eyes, and memories rose. Not one, not two, but thousands, scattered, fractured. Like shards of a reflection, each showing a piece of him. Childhood, boot camp, battlefields, his mother's voice, his brother's laughter. The first time he stitched a wound on a burning battlefield, but one memory kept pulling at him, like a gravity well in thought. Razak Shun sensed it. Don't resist, let it come. Mason breathed slow, and the memory bloomed. The memory he was 8 years old, standing outside a hospital room, white halls, sterile smell, lights humming. Inside the room, his father lay in a bed, hooked to machines. Skin pale, Mason, young, small, clutched the doorframe. His mother crouched and whispered, "You can go in, he's waiting for you." But Mason did not move. He couldn't. His legs shook. His chest felt crushed. He was terrified, terrified of seeing death, terrified of seeing someone he loved fading away. His father called weakly, "Mason," but Mason backed away. He turned and ran, down the hall, out of the ward, out of the building. He never saw him again. When Mason returned the next day, his father was already gone. Present Mason's breathing cracked. His voice came shattered. I didn't say goodbye. I ran. I left him alone. Razak Shun listened, not judging. Mason continued, fists clenched. He waited for me. He asked for me, and I ran. Tears shook loose. Razak Shun placed a hand gently on Mason's back. You were 8 years old. It doesn't matter, Mason hissed. I abandoned him. I was a coward. Razak Shun spoke quietly. No, you were a child facing death, and no child knows how to hold that weight. But Mason shook his head. He died thinking I didn't care. He died with that. Mason bowed forward, elbows on knees, face in hands. Razak Shun let the silence breathe. Finally, this is the knot, the true one, a memory unresolved, tied with guilt and grief. Mason looked up. And how does that affect reality? Razak Shun answered with a slow inhale. Every human carries emotional scars. But yours is not just emotional. It became ontological, a fracture of self-perception at a formative age, a belief that you run from those who need you. Mason's mouth tightened. Because I did. Razak Shun continued. You carry that belief into every battlefield, every mission, every wound. Mason remembered the ruined streets of Vel'Kor, how he'd rushed to the front, how he refused evacuation, how he tried to die standing. Razak Shun saw realization forming. You fight with something to prove. Something to compensate. You believed you had to be fearless because a part of you still sees that boy who ran. Mason closed his eyes. Yes, that was true. That was the core. Memory rift expands. Razak Shun's voice deepened. This unresolved guilt becomes a probability mass, a personal gravity that bends the worlds around you. Mason stared. How? You think death is the true betrayal, so you protect others at the cost of yourself. You try to rewrite the memory, to be the man who stays instead of running. Mason felt his throat tighten. Razak Shun continued. In the siege, you saw Jonah's fall, and you did not run. You saw Hale die, and you held him. You saw Beck fight, you stayed with him. You healed them, even when healing meant dying next to them. Mason whispered, I kept choosing their lives over mine. Razak Shun nodded. Because the wound inside you kept insisting, I will not abandon again. The question of God. Mason wiped his face, staring out at the dark ocean. Then he said quietly, "My father used to pray, not loud, just quietly. He'd look at the stars and mutter, 'We're not alone in this.'" Razak Shun tilted his head. "And do you believe that?" Mason answered without hesitation. "I want to." Razak Shun considered that. "A wanting belief is still a bridge. Your father believed in a quiet order behind reality, a gentle hand." Mason nodded. "And I never understood it, not when I was a kid." Razak Shun looked up at the sky. "Perhaps the reason your father asked for you in his final moments was not to see a fearless son, but simply a present one, a boy who cared." Mason felt something internal shift, an old knot easing. Razak Shun continued, "Perhaps the quiet intelligence, the one behind reality, did not judge you for running. Perhaps your father didn't either." Mason felt tears return, not as shame this time, but as release. Revisiting the memory, Razak Shun spoke gently. "You must go back, not physically, but consciously. Re-enter the moment that wounded you." Mason inhaled deep and slow. He closed his eyes, and the hospital came back. The hallway, the lights, the machines, the room, the bed, his father. But this time Mason walked forward. He entered. He stood beside the bed. His father's hand reached weakly, and young Mason took it. His father smiled, tired but warm. "It's okay to be scared," he whispered. Mason, now adult and child in layered memory, whispered, "I'm here, Dad." And the man smiled and squeezed his small hand. "You always were." The room faded, the memory dissolved, but its weight, its sting, its chains lifted. Integration. Mason opened his eyes. He felt lighter, quieter, whole. Razak Shun watched him, studying every micro-expression. Finally, Mason spoke. "I don't have to prove anything anymore." Razak Shun nodded. "Yes." Mason said softly, "I don't have to fight death every time. I don't have to burn myself to save everyone. I can choose when to stand and when to heal." Razak Shun smiled, a faint, alien smile. "This is integration. The knot inside you loosens." Mason breathed deeply, and the world around him, Lo's angels, the Pacific, the star-pierced night, felt stable, real, coherent. The unexpected arrival, then a ripple in the air. Razak Shun turned sharply. Mason tensed. A dark object descended from the sky, fast, silent, deliberate. It was no Brexari vessel, nor Vel'Korian, nor human. It landed on the cliff, unfolding like a metallic flower. A door opened, and out stepped a figure in white armor bearing the insignia of no known species, no known alliance, no known political signature. Razak Shun whispered in a voice of dread, "Not them." Mason stood. "Who is that?" Razak Shun answered slowly. "A species that does not respect choice. They do not respect possibility. They do not respect free will. They enforce a single future, theirs." The armored figure approached. Voice synthesized. "Subject Mason Reed, you have interfered in a restricted probability domain. You will come with us." Mason's jaw tightened. "And if I do?" The figure pointed a palm, energy crackling. Razak Shun stepped between them. "You will not take him." But the figure spoke like an executioner of physics itself. "He is not yours to protect. He is an anchor, and anchors cannot be left in uncontrolled timelines." Mason felt something ignite inside him. Not fear, not defiance, something deeper, a core of resolved identity. He stepped forward beside Razak Shun, eyes hard. "If I am an anchor, then I choose where I stand." The wind stilled. Stars hung silent. Reality seemed to listen. The armored voice replied, "Then you have chosen rebellion." Mason didn't flinch. "No, I've chosen humanity." And as the ocean roared below, and the intruder raised its weapon, Mason felt reality gather around him like armor. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't fighting to escape guilt. He was fighting as himself. The storm over Detrian's capital broke like a wounded animal. It tore across the dark sky with the violence of a planet trying to expel its own atmosphere. Wind ripped through broken metal beams and shattered synth glass windows. Lightning cracked like dying gods slashing the horizon. And in the middle of the chaos, a lone human officer stood in silence. General Mason Reed. His uniform was scorched, his face cut, his breathing heavy, but his posture was straight like a mast on a doomed ship refusing to snap. Before him stood Prime Sovereign Karan, surrounded by the armored elite guard of Detrian. Their armor glowed with humming alien circuitry. Their weapons aimed at Mason's heart, but Mason didn't reach for a gun. He raised his hands slowly, palms forward. "I'm not here to kill you," he called over the wind, Prime Sovereign Karin regarded him, tall, imposing, reptilian eyes narrowing. You finish what you began, human. You came to end us. Do not pretend mercy now. Lightning flashed across the ruins. For a brief instant, every fallen soldier, human and alien, were illuminated like frozen statues. Mason shook his head. No, he said. I came believing humans were soft, weak, undisciplined. I was wrong. The Prime Sovereign's head tilted, curious. We are not weak, Mason continued. We are adaptive, we bleed, we suffer, and because we know pain, we understand the cost of inflicting it. A hush rippled through the alien guard. Mason lowered his voice. If you kill me, you keep the cycle spinning. But if you talk, really talk, we might survive together. Prime Sovereign Karin stepped forward, slow and deliberate. You humans torture yourselves with hope, he said. Detrian survives by strength, not sentiment. Mason didn't flinch. We tried strength, he answered. Look around. The alien leader scanned the wreckage, burning transport vehicles, fallen mechs, cities gutted from artillery strikes, both sides bleeding. For what, then, behind Mason, a hum of engines, a landing transport, human craft, Earth insignia, but not military. It was white, plain, symbol of the Earth-conquered council. A hatch opened. And from it descended the man Mason never expected to see again, Grand Marshal Orion Hale. Mason stared in disbelief. Hale's presence was impossible. The council had forced him into retirement after Eden 12, after the massacre, after the scandal, but here he stood, older, grayer, but eyes burning. Orion Hale walked past Mason and stopped 3 steps ahead of him. Then he spoke, not to the alien, but to Mason. You gave me a hard truth once, Hale said. You told me humans weren't weak, just human. Mason blinked. He remembered that conversation in a shuttle hold years ago. Hale turned to the alien sovereign. You think we came here because we fear you, but that's wrong. He looked upward through the broken sky. We came because we feared ourselves. Prime Sovereign Karin's eyes narrowed. Hale continued. Our history is soaked in blood, human against human. We've burned continents, ruined ecosystems, erased species. We are experts in violence, but now, finally, humanity is learning. He touched his chest. We can't keep winning wars. We have to learn to stop starting them. Silence, wind, rain, quiet devastation. Then Karin spoke. You offer cooperation. But what does humanity offer Detrian in return? Mason stepped forward, standing beside Hale now. Not surrender, he said. Not dominance, but shared survival. Thunder rolled. Karin's voice was deep. And if I decline? Mason answered simply. Then the war ends with extinction. Ours or yours, no victory, no legacy, just another dead species in a cold universe that never cared. That landed hard. Finally, after a long pause, the sovereign lowered his weapon. Then he said, You humans speak of compassion as though it is strength. Perhaps it is. Mason exhaled. But then a scream across the comms. Unauthorized fire from Ridge 7. The hillside lit up. Massive Detrian artillery cannons, still operational, firing automatically. Shells screamed downward. One aimed directly at Mason. In that instant, Mason didn't think, he acted. He lunged, tackling Prime Sovereign Karin off the platform, shielding him. A blast hit. The palace balcony exploded in a cyclone of flame and debris. Mason's ears rang. Vision blurred. His side burned. Pain dug deep. When the smoke cleared, he and Karin were lying on the shattered stone, Mason on top, shielding the alien leader with his own body. Slowly, Karin looked up at him. You protected me, the alien said. Mason winced. Of course, he whispered. That's what allies do. Then his vision flickered. Hale ran over. Mason, Hale shouted. Stay awake, look at me, Mason tried. His voice was weak. General, he smiled faintly. No, not general anymore, right? Hale's hand tightened on his shoulder. You stubborn bastard, Mason coughed. It's okay, I'm tired of fighting. Karin lowered his reptilian head beside Mason. You humans, he murmured, are not soft, you are resolute. Mason smirked slightly. Yeah, don't tell Twitter. His eyes faded slightly. Prime Sovereign, listen, protect the civilians, humans and Detrian both. Karin nodded solemnly. You have my word. Mason's breathing slowed. It matters, he whispered. That future matters, lightning flashed, and then a soft tone. Not thunder, not artillery, Every functioning military device on both sides flashed a truce signal from Detrian command, from Earth command, simultaneously. A synchronized ceasefire across the planet. Quiet settled, no gunfire, no missiles, just the sound of wind. After a moment, Karin spoke softly. Human Mason Reed, you just ended a war. Mason stared up at the dark, swirling clouds as rain hit his skin. Maybe he couldn't stop every war in the universe, but he stopped this one, and sometimes that was enough. His eyes closed, but they didn't stay closed. His vitals stabilized, medics arrived, emergency nanofiber packs deployed, sealing wounds, restoring oxygenation. He didn't die, he didn't fold, he survived. Barely, but he did. And when Mason finally woke in a recovery chamber aboard an Earth-Detrian peace vessel, he saw something on the wall, a metal plaque. 2 languages, human English and Detrian glyph script. It read, "Strength is not the absence of compassion, it is the mastery of it." And beneath that, "Honoring Corporal Mason Reed, defender of peace between worlds." His voice cracked as he chuckled. Corporal, still, a nearby Detrian attendant, a young male medic, looked up. "The title was intentional," he said calmly, "because on this world, corporals lead soldiers, but humans lead civilizations." For the first time in a long time, Mason let himself smile. It was over. And a new beginning had just dawned.